Hey everybody, if you can believe it, the year is half over. I know I said it out loud, I shouldn't have, but 2022 is half done. Oh, deep breath. But that does mean we can do some exciting tags like the mid-year book Freakout tag, which I am here to do for you today. So let's get started. Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. It's Russell with Ink and Paper Blog. How are you doing today? As always, I hope you're happy, I hope you're healthy, I hope you're safe, and of course I hope you're reading an amazing book, or two or three or four. I come to you from vacation land. As I said, I'm pre-recording some videos, so hence the same shirt, but I am in Oregon probably reading the books that were in my last video. But today I'm here to do the mid-year book Freakout tag. So I first saw that Mercedes had done this year, Mercedes and Mercy Musings, who you know I adore. And then I saw Jalen over at the bar in the bookcase. Follow him on Instagram, follow him on TikTok if that's you. I'm too old for TikTok. He also has a YouTube channel, definitely worth. He interviews authors. He is so good at all of this. So, you know, I thought, Russell, let's do a tag. You haven't done a tag in ages. So here we are. Let's get out that pen, that paper, that Goodreads, however you keep track of your TBR, because some of these books are going to need to be on it. If you are so able, please order these books from your local independent bookstore and or have your library get you a copy if you're a library user. Okay, so the first question is always like the big one, right? What's the best book that you've read this year? And I've read a lot of amazing books. I'm being honest, I don't know how I'm going to pick a top 10. But the book that I have recommended the most this year, the one that sort of sticks in my head, one of the most anticipated books of 2022, and rightly so. You know, in my channel, the big books aren't the ones that I talk about, but this one was it's a masterpiece, and that's Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart. Douglas Stewart won the Booker for Shuggie Bain. He needs no introduction. But I'll be honest with you, I just think this book is way, way better. I think it's brilliant. So this book is the story of Mungo. It's told in two parts. So at the very beginning of the book, we find that Mungo is being sent away with two men that his mother has met in AA. It's for some undisclosed reason, but he's going on a fishing trip into the hills of England, right? Or Scotland. Sorry, this takes place in Scotland. He's on this trip. Now, trigger warning, these men are not on the up and up when it comes to children. And it is some stuff that's very disturbing occurs. So I want to make sure you're aware of that. But it definitely is handled with tact and taste, okay? The other half of the story is the life of Mungo, his family. He is raised, I'll say, he has a mother who is an alcoholic and often disappearing, his older sister who really raises him, and her desire to sort of do better. She wants to go to school, things that get in her way, and his brother, who is sort of the leader of the local Protestant gang. Mungo meets another young boy, a young Catholic boy. They form a relationship, a friendship that turns romantic, and all of the implications of that. There's a lot about the Catholic, Irish, Protestant, Irish conflict in here. There's also a lot about sort of the idea of what makes a man, what are we allowed to do and not allowed to do. And you know, all of that stuff that Douglas Stewart is so good of talking about. I laughed, I cried, I laughed, I cried, I cried, I cried. But there's like a lyrical sense of hope to all of the stuff that you read. It's really, really good. I know you probably don't need me to sell you on it, but Young Mungo, Douglas Stewart, probably the best book that I've read this year so far. So the next question is actually, what's the best sequel you've read this year? And to be honest with you, I haven't read any. So I cannot answer this question. I have lots of plans, actually, including the book that's going to answer the next question, to read some sequels, but it just hasn't happened in the first half of the year. So I'm skipping question 2 and going on to question number 3, which is, what is a new release you haven't read yet this year, but you want to? And that is a sequel. And that is Until the Last of Me by Sylvan Newell. This is out from Tor.com Publishing. You may remember that I talked about the first book in this series, A History of What Comes Next, a few months ago now, probably towards February, I believe. My friend Paul recommended it, ran through it, and this is the sequel that is out already. And he also said that this one is very, very good. So this is like one of those sci-fi novels that's sort of set in historical times with sort of like this twist to it, okay? At the beginning of the book, we meet this mother-daughter tandem, and we find out that throughout history, these mother-daughter tandems, never more than one mother and one daughter. So when the daughter finally has a child, the mother winds up disappearing. And they have been going throughout history. They believe they were put here on the planet to help humanity get to the stars, okay? So we learn a lot about them, and we follow in the first book, we follow a mother-daughter pair through sort of like the race to space. So the rocket era, they work in Russia on trying to get things into space and all of that. But they are also being hunted by a group of men who believe it's their job to stop these women from what they're trying to do. What I love about this book is, one, you can just get absorbed into sort of that narrative. But it's this idea, this mythology of these people and what they have been doing for generations, and whether or not it's based in any sense of reality. If it has any sort of beginning and that actually occurred. You don't know. So it's like this weird idea of following sort of a path that you believe has been laid out for you, that you don't even know really and truly everything that's come before. If that makes sense. It's fascinating, but it's a page turner. There's so much to it. So I cannot wait to read Until the Last of Me by Sylvan Newell, book 2 in the Take Them to the Stars series, out now from Tor.com. Okay, the next question is, what is the most anticipated release for the second half of 2022? Okay, so it leaves nothing to be said that if Cormac McCarthy is going to publish a book after 16 years since his last book, it's going to be a big deal, right? And I am a huge Cormac McCarthy fan. Now, have I read all of his books? No, but I've read like 6 or 7 of his books, and I pretty much have loved every one that I've read. And so he has a new book coming out, and that is The Passenger, which comes out in October from Knopf. So I want to say, Knopf, thank you so much for sending me this early copy. It actually has a companion novel that will come out in September called Stella Maris, which is going to be a companion novel to this. So 2 Cormac McCarthy books in 1 year. All this says is that a sunken jet, 9 passengers, a missing body. The Passenger is the story of a salvage diver, haunted by loss, afraid of the watery deep, pursued for a conspiracy beyond his understanding, and a longing for death that he cannot reconcile with God. I just trust Cormac McCarthy. Now, it's weird because I've read a number of his books. Most of them have been the Western ones. I have read No Country for Old Men, which is sort of a more contemporary type book. I've read The Road, which is sort of his dystopian future. This one seems set very now, which seems odd to me a little bit, but I'm super excited to see what he does with it. Huge fan. So again, thank you, Knopf, for sending me Cormac McCarthy's The Passenger. This comes out in October, and let me see if it says October 2022. I don't have an exact date, but you should pre-order it and get your hands on it right now. I highly recommend it. And in the meantime, if you haven't read any Cormac McCarthy, now's the time. Start with All the Pretty Horses. You won't regret it. Okay, question number 5 is biggest disappointment of this year. Now, I don't really read books that disappoint me because if I'm not enjoying something, I usually move on. I don't have time to finish books that I'm not liking. I just have too much to read. But I will say one book that I had higher expectations for than it delivered was If You Change Your Mind by Robbie Weber, out from Inkyard Press. Now, I hadn't known Inkyard Press before I read this book, and then when I started to dive into them, they have some amazing books that I need to get my hands onto. Now, Robbie was actually, I believe he was like an Instagrammer, and somehow got himself this book deal. And I think that's very interesting. But this is a gay YA novel set in this little tiny town. Our main character is sort of focused. He wants to get into film school. That's all he wants to do. But his ex-boyfriend comes back. A new boy comes to town. And all about the relationships with him and his friends and being a teenager and all of those things. It is a perfectly enjoyable read. However, it is a little cliche. It is a little stilted at times. The main character is not, I don't need him to be likable, but he just has this edge to him that doesn't quite make sense for the whole narrative. It just was a book that I wanted more from. So that's If You Change Your Mind by Robbie Weber. This is out from Inkyard Press. If you like gay YA, it's totally up your alley. I mean, I don't think you'll be disappointed that you read it. I just wanted more. Okay. Number 6 is biggest surprise of the year, and that has to be Address Unknown by Catherine Cressman Taylor. This is a reissue from Echo Publishing. This is a short story, really. They call it a novella, but I'm sorry, I think the whole thing is 70 some odd pages, and it's a lot of empty space. That came out quite a while ago. I believe it came out in the 50s? No, 1938. Completely wrong, Russell. World War II. Having a hard time talking and thinking today. So this is a book told in letters. Now at the start we meet two men that sort of own this art gallery. One is Jewish, staying in America, and one is returning to Germany. Okay, and as their conversation starts to go back and forth, it's very, amicable. They're friends, they own this company together. But then World War II happens, the Nazis come into power, and the tone changes from the gentleman that is in Germany. And he sort of starts cutting off ties. And then an event occurs where he does something that affects the man who's in America. And things turn. This book's last few pages are heart-stopping, but it is so good. I read somewhere that Catherine didn't feel like America was taking the Nazi situation seriously enough and not understanding what was going on over there. And so this was sort of her answer to that. And if your heart doesn't stop and you start to think about these sort of fascist regimes and what horrible dictators do to their people, there's nothing else you can do. This book is just brilliant. So that's Address Unknown by Catherine Cressman Taylor, and this little tiny version is out from Echo. I highly recommend. It surprised the heck out of me. I had no idea that so few pages could pack such a punch. Had never heard of it until I picked it up. Loved it. Okay, the next question is a favorite new author. A book that I read this year, debut author, brand new book, just brilliant. Nuclear Family by Joseph Hahn. After finishing this book, I will read everything that he writes moving forward. I think it is brilliant. This is out from Counterpoint, I do believe. Let me check to make sure. Yep, Counterpoint, out of Berkeley, which is in my neighborhood, right up the way. Okay, so Nuclear Family is the story of a Korean American family that lives in Hawaii. They immigrated there, the parents did, with a son, and then they had a daughter who was born here. The son is going through some growing pains. He's trying to figure out who he is. He's coming to terms sort of with his sexual identity. The daughter is in college. She just smokes a lot of weed throughout this book, sort of in a way to sort of escape everything. The parents own a restaurant where they serve lunches, Korean, what are they called? Those lunches, I'm totally blanking on the name, but they were visited by Guy Fieri, which is a really hilarious part of the book where they talk about what that was like. Really well done. But the son decides to go to South Korea to teach English, to sort of find himself. While he's there, he finds out that he can see ghosts, and he runs into the ghost of his grandfather. His grandfather, who has been dead for a couple of decades and who has been trying to cross the demilitarized zone between South Korea and North Korea as a ghost to find the family he left behind when he came to South Korea. And what he winds up doing is he winds up possessing the body of this boy and trying to get him to cross the DMZ and the implications that has. This book is a deep dive into the effects that the separation of North and South Korea had on the people. It's a deep dive into family dynamics, sort of how actions of one affect actions of all. It's about family love and trust, and also just about the history of our families and what we may not know has built us into the people we are. And it's also a discussion of coming to your own queer sensibilities, figuring out who you are, and all of that, and just the troubles of growing up. It's brilliant. He was named one of National Book Awards 5 under 35. It's amazing. So that's Nuclear Family by Joseph Hahn. Okay, I've really got a lot of questions left. Newest favorite crush. I don't really have crushes on anyone in a book, but I will say I have been in love with the love story of Nick and Charlie from Heartstopper. Since the show came out, I've reread all of the books. I just am so in awe of how this Alice Oseman, she just tackles some tough subjects, but with such grace, and there's so much humor and love and just so much. So my crush is on the wonderful, beautiful, budding relationship of Nick and Charlie in Heartstopper. I hope that's enough for you. The next is your newest favorite character. I've talked about this book a few times because I love it so much, but the Gilded Ones provided me with Decca, who is the main character, who is she's just a kick-butt young lady. She finds out that she has sort of a purpose. I want to say a predestined fate, but she is going to take on the patriarchy. She's going to change society. This book is set in a world where the patriarchy keeps women down, and at a certain age, they're tested. And if they test with gold blood like she did, they're considered demons. They're often killed. But she's kept alive in order to join an army to stop this invasion force in this book. And we find out that the patriarchy has been lying for a long time. Surprise, surprise. And she becomes part of the unit that's going to liberate everything. I'm going to read the sequel to this actually on my vacation, which I'm on right now. I loved her. I loved this book. I loved everything by it. So that's The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna, out from this one's out from Ember. The second one's out from De La Court Press. I think they're both imprints of one another. Okay. The next one is Book That Made You Cry This Year. Hands down, Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins-Valdez, out from Berkeley. This is based on a true story, a court case that went to the Supreme Court about the state of Alabama and its illegal, what's the word I'm looking for? Sterilization of young black women, and also across the country, young women of color and poorer women. They just chose to sterilize them to keep them from having children. This is a story of a young nurse that starts her career at a family health clinic, finds out some stuff that's going on, tries to protect two young girls. Things happen, and the sort of the implications of that. What happens to these young girls, and then you find out has been happening across the United States, is heart-wrenching, heartbreaking. It's a lot about poverty, how people, when they are poor, are definitely dictated to by society, and the government does things just to keep them down. And the book sort of talks and sort of dives into that, but in its heart, it's a story of one woman's love for two young girls and trying to get them out of that and into something new. It broke my heart. It's so very, very good. Take My Hand, Dolan Perkins-Valdez, out from Berkeley. Trust me, you will enjoy it. Okay, but it will make you cry. It will make you cry. Next book is Book That Made You Happy This Year. This is actually hard for me. You guys know I don't read a lot of happy fiction, but one book that I enjoyed, turned the pages, could not stop reading, is The Change by Kristen Miller. It's not over, it's time. So this is about women. 3 women that we learn are actually part of groups of women across the United States, but when they come into sort of menopause age, they get some powers. We have 3 women here. One is sort of like an herbalist witch. One is able to speak and see the dead, and the other one sort of has this immense strength. What is fascinating and fantastic about this book is, at its heart, it's about solving a murder. There's a young girl that the one who can see ghosts finds. The police are sort of sweeping it under the table, and she doesn't believe it. So she and these 2 women are going to find out what's going on. So that is sort of the thinnest layer of this book, because what we really learn is the history of these women, how they've been fighting against society all this time for their own success, the choices they make, the liberation they have when they sort of come into their own. It's funny, it's sexy, it's tragic, it's empowering. You're just rooting for these women to sort of kick some butt, find the answers, and they do. I don't want to give any of it away, because I truly found it to be quite engaging and surprising and all of that kind of stuff. I really just made me happy when it ended the way it ended. I totally loved it. Highly, highly recommend The Change by Kristen Miller. Kirsten Miller. I keep saying Kristen. That's wrong. I'm sorry, Kirsten. Miller, out now from William Morrow Books. Okay. Most beautiful book you bought or received this year. I have to say, I bought this at the Bay Area Book Festival, and it's twofold. One, this is At the Edge of the Woods by Matsusugu Ono, translated from the Japanese by Juliet Winters Carpenter, out from Two Lines Press. And just take a moment. Beautiful cover. Then you add to that they gave this bookmark, which is just so stunning. I just love it so much. I'm not even using it because I'm afraid I'll lose it or I will destroy it. So what is this book about? Let's see. In an unnamed foreign country, a family of 3 is settling into a house at the edge of the woods, but something is off. A sound, at first like coughing and then like laughter, emanates from the nearby forest. Fantastical creatures, it is said, live out there in a castle where feudal lords reign and resistance fighters fell. When the mother, fearing another miscarriage, returns to her family home to give birth to a second child, father and son are left to their own devices in rural isolation. Haunted by the ever-present woods, they look on as the TV flashes with floods and processions of refugees. The boy brings a mysterious half-naked old woman home, but before the father can make sense of her presence, she disappears. A mail carrier with gnashing teeth visits to deliver nothing but gossip of violence. A tree stump in the yard refuses to die, no matter how generously the poison is applied. At the Edge of the Woods by Matsusugu Ono, translated from the Japanese by Juliet Winters Carpenter. Sounds phenomenal. And that cover, that's why it's on this list, is this cover. I mean, that's art, right? It's absolute art. So beautiful. Okay. Last but not least is what do you need to read by the end of the year? So this is a book that I've gotten this year that I definitely want to read. When I saw this author speak, I was blown away by her in every aspect. It was just she's so inspiring, and I just loved her. And I hadn't read her book, and so I picked up The Fortune Men by Nadifa Mohammed. This is out by Knopf in the United States, and she kindly signed my copy, which was really, really nice of her. And this is based on a true story of Mahmoud Matan in Cardiff, Wales in 1952. He is a Somali sailor who's accused of a crime that he didn't commit, and sort of what happens. I'm kind of going into it knowing only what she talked about. I do know that it does not end well, and that it's a lot about how society sort of targets someone, a person of color, and decides that they're going to be guilty for something, even if they're not. That makes sense. So that's The Fortune Men by Nadifa Mohammed, out from Knopf, and I can't wait to read that. So that's the mid-year book Freakout tag. I hope that I introduced you to a number of books. I'm going to try to hold these up. I don't make any promises at this point. Introduced you to an amazing book or 2 or 3 or 4. I really appreciate all of you. Let's see if I can do it. Sticking around for a long video to talk about books. You know how much I can do that. Oh, this is a big stack. Oh, look at that. Good job, Russell. As always, if you are a return subscriber, I could not do this without you. Thank you so very, very much. If you are new to my channel, I hope that you like what you see. Subscribe, click the bell, all that fun and favorite stuff. As always, I encourage you to read locally. I encourage you to read globally, but shop locally. And until next time, I wish you a happy reading. Bye, everyone.